Umami Produktion presenterar Metropolpodden.
I had an accident and I have to stay out of work to education several months. I get bored. So I start to write fiction, to give it a try, and then I liked it. And now that's what I'm doing for 22 years.
Hej och välkomna till Metropolpodden. En podd där vi samtalar med talangfulla och inspirerande kreatörer, entreprenörer och frilansare inom media och tech från Metropols egna nätverk. Vi som håller i podden idag är jag, Cesar Sierra, och min eminenta kollega Frida Larsen.
Hej hej!
En oväntad händelse blev startskottet för en ny karriärbana. Sedan dess har Sylvain Runberg hunnit skriva hela 146 grafiska noveller med titlar som The Girl with a Dragon Tattoo, Fantomen, Conan Barbaren och samarbeten med DC. Han har etablerat sig som en internationell tungviktare inom serievärlden. Han rör sig ledigt mellan serietidningar, tv-serier och spelmanus. I Frankrike gästar han morgonsofforna och nu är han hos oss på Metropol. Välkommen!
Tack! Hej, god morgon, bonjour, hello.
God morgon.
Eftersom Sylvain kommer från Frankrike kommer intervjun att ske på engelska. Hi and welcome Sylvain to Metropol.
Hi, thank you to receive me in your podcast.
Thanks.
Thank you for being here.
Yes, really happy to be a part of it.
How are you today?
I'm good. I've been mountain biking downhill for 4 days, this weekend. So I'm just coming back from Järvsö, which is a bike park in Sweden.
Okay.
One of the best bike park in Europe. Only 3 hours of train from Stockholm.
Cool.
So,
How come? It's a hobby?
Yeah, I really like mountain bike and bike in general. And I've discovered downhill at Järvsö quite recently. I mean, I start downhill at 50 years old.
Okay.
Which is really nice. I can recommend if you want nice sensation, speed, a bit of action. And it's really family friendly.
That's nice.
But you're from France, Sylvain. How come you live in Sweden? How did your journey begin here?
It's because my wife is Swedish, so that's why I came to Sweden. And because I'm a scriptwriter and a writer, I can work from anywhere. So before I come from south of France, then I live in Paris. And then when I become a professional scriptwriter, I decide to move to Sweden for private reason.
And how long have you lived here now?
On and off, because for a long time I was sharing my time between Sweden and France. But if we take from the start, it's almost 18 years now.
Wow.
That I'm in between Sweden and France. But for several years, I'm full-time in Sweden.
Mm. You can really say that you understand the Swedish culture and...
The Swedish culture, yeah, I think I
Politics.
Jag förstår lite.
Yeah.
Yes, because I'm really interested into it. The language, I'm not at top level in prata på svenska, men jag kan förstå lite, prata lite. But for the interview, it's better to take it in English, I think, for the audience.
All right, great. But okay, so your parents are also a bit artistic, right? Where did your creative gene come from?
Gene, I don't know, but yeah, my mother, she was a painter, and she was also a teacher of art history. So, and my father was a drawer in industrial drawer. So I grew up surrounded by artists. I think the first time I follow my mother because she had to take me with her. So I think my first culture lesson at the university in Belgium was when I was 3 years old.
Okay.
That's one of my first memory, actually.
But you're grown up in Belgium?
No, actually, I'm born in Belgium because my mother was Belgian, but my father is French.
Okay.
So I think we moved when I was 3 years old to south of France. So I grew up in south of France.
Okay.
In Provence.
Yeah,
that's where I'm coming from.
But would you say that your parents are the lead for you to dip your toes into the artistic career, or have you always wanted to work with graphic novel or?
No, I mean, I've been always surrounded by culture, especially with my mother. So I've started to read comics when I was 5 years old, for example. And because I come from Belgium, comics are a really strong part of the culture in Belgium and in France too. So it's really usual to start to read with comics and continue to read comics as a teenager and I grew up.
How come?
I think because we have like such like title like Tintin and Asterix and these kind of comics were also made for grown-up, but they start to create it like in the 50s, 60s. So we have like a tradition of like having a graphic novel and comics considered as a real part of literature. So that means that the market there and is really like much bigger than a lot of other countries. I think last year they sold in France 85 millions of graphic novel and comics and manga.
But is it like only for children, or like remember you told me about that there's a lot of comics even in the economy section, or everything can be made in comics?
Yeah, exactly. No, I mean, I think like in France, 80% of the comics that are published are for grown-up. Mm-hmm. So most of and of course there's a lot of comics made for kids. So it's like really like books and novel. You have everything.
Okay.
Every genre, science fiction, crime, also history, some autobiographic story. And you can have like also like graphic novel as documentary about environment, about politics, about like politician or famous people. So it's really like if you enter a comic book in France, you have to imagine it will be like Akademibokhandeln, same size, but only with graphic novel and the same kind of section.
Wow.
They're so different from here. Why is it that we don't have so much comics here in Sweden, do you think?
That's a question I wonder for 20 years now. Because there's a lot of people that read in Sweden, and you have a strong like illustrated books for kids industry. So why there is no comics, it's a mystery. Especially that it's really good also to bring people like to books via comics and graphic novel. So even in terms of the industry, the economy, I think they are losing a lot not developing comics and graphic novel in Sweden.
But are there other markets like the US or maybe Japan that's quite big too?
Yeah, Japan is surely the bigger market. I think in Japan, 40% of the books that are manga. France, I think the graphic novel comics is like 10%. And I don't know the number in Sweden, but if you put like Kalle Anka aside, it must be, I don't know, 0.3% of the books that are comics in the selling of the book Swedish industry. I don't have the number, but obviously it's really small. For a comparison, I mean, I come from like a small village, like in south of France, and we have a small town, 12,000 people nearby, and there is a small supermarket in this town. So I'm talking about something like ICA.
Yeah.
There is a book section in this supermarket. In comics, they have more title than the biggest Akademibokhandeln in Stockholm.
Wow. That's amazing.
That's a kind of different. Really big in France, really small in Sweden.
Yeah.
So.
Is it all ages that read comic books, or is like even elderly people
I mean,
reading
if you go to a comic book shop in France or a comic festival, most of the people will be grown up, but then you have kids, of course, also a lot of kids. So it can be from 5 to 95.
Wow. It's safe to say it's not only like childish, like graphic novel. This is like
not at all.
Adapt.
No.
Cool. We have a lot to do here in Sweden. I can hear that. Now you are sitting and working from Dark Riviera. Tell me, what is Dark Riviera?
Yeah, so I've started to work with graphic novel and comics as a professional writer like 20 years ago. So from then, now I've published almost 150 titles, really different things like from science fiction and fantasy and crime and autobiography and history. So most of the time I create my own story, but I have also work on like pre-existing IP. So I've adapted like The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo from Stieg Larsson in graphic novel. I've adapted also Karen Alftegren, who is like a Swedish crime author, really, really good one. I've adapted Conan the Barbarian, another genre. I've adapted Liu Cixin, who is the most famous science fiction Chinese writer today. He has done The Free Body Problem that have been adapted on Netflix, and I've adapted 3 other novels from him. And then now I'm working for DC, so really soon there is my first Superman story that will be published the same day than the new movie in July, and then in September I will publish my first long graphic novel for DC with Wonder Woman and Harley Quinn. So I've done a lot of different things, and 7 years ago I've started to work in the TV industry on a Swedish project that I co-created actually was called Cryptid, that was broadcast by Viaplay. So working on different TV series projects. And then 3-4 years ago, I've started to work as a narrative director, narrative designer in video games. A narrative designer is the name for a scriptwriter in video games, to make it short. So I work on a project called Warship Jolly Roger with in English video game studio called Proxima. Warship Jolly Roger is an adaptation of one of my graphic novels with Mickey Montlo, with who I'm doing Wonder Woman 2. And from that, I've met people in Sweden, like Robert Backstrom, who is a video game producer, and David Dusa, who is a writer and a director, Swedish-Hungarian, and Emily Bleza, who is a really famous French producer that have produced a lot of documentary and movie for 20 years. And then we just realized we had the same interest in developing our story on a 360 approach, meaning it could be developed as a graphic novel, as a movie, as a TV series, as a video game. And so we have created this company called Dark Riviera, with an IP boutique that we run, and we have our office at Metropole. And that's how Dark Riviera started 4 years ago.
Yeah, your office looks really cool.
Yeah.
It's like you said, in France you can find this big section of graphic novels, and it's just the same with your office. It's like a big
really cool.
skyltfönster.
There is a lot of books. So yeah. I mean, it's nice to have because I've published 150 titles, but then I've been published in I think 27 countries today also. So I've received every time there is one of my book is published in one country, I receive between 1 or 3 copy of it also. So that means that I have 100 of my books in the office, and of course people are really welcome to pass by, and if they want free graphic novel, they can have it. It won't be in Swedish, because I have a lot of books published in Sweden already, but those copies disappear immediately as I'm in Sweden, and the same with the English version. But if you're interested in a Chinese, Polish, Turkish, Italian version of one of my books, I have that in stock.
Yeah, but you said that you do a lot of adaptations. Is that people come to you and ask, hey, could you do this adaptation, or is it you have an idea of things you want to do?
It's both way. For example, for Millennium from Stieg Larsson, I have proposed it to a publisher because I was already in Sweden when Millennium was published. So I read it quite early, a bit before it became so big worldwide. So I proposed to one of my publishers to try to do it. So we negotiate with the people in charge of the IP, and there was a lot of competition there. There was a lot of different publishers and authors who wanted to do Millennium, but at the end they chose me. And I guess the fact that I live in Sweden, I know the countries, I completely understood what Millennium was about, because there is a lot about the Swedish politics behind Millennium. And also I study politics at the university. I have a Master of Politics in Media and Far Right. That was my specialization. And that was also the subject of Millennium, about what is to be a journalist in the early 2000s, and the rise of the far right, in Sweden and Europe in general. And that was subject that was interested to, and feminism. And Lisbeth Salander was a hacker. And at the time when Millennium was published, it was quite rare to have a hacker as a main character in a fiction. Now it's really common, but when Millennium was published, it was one of the first one that became so big with this kind of character.
How come you didn't do journalism?
I wanted to do journalism actually at the start, but then I started to work in the book industry after the university, and then I became a professional scriptwriter around 2003, 2004 by accident actually. I had an accident and I have to stay out of work to education several months. And so I had to come back to my parents. I was 32. And then because I get bored, so I start to write fiction to give it a try. And then I liked it. And then when I came back to my work in the book industry, that has nothing to do with being an author. At the start, I was working in the marketing. And then I start to send some of my projects to other publishers. And like in 6 months, I think I signed 4 different projects. And I say, okay, I give it a chance. I quit my job. And now that's what I'm doing for 22 years.
Wow.
But the initial question, when I do an adaptation, so yeah, for Millennium, for example, I have proposed it for Conan, have been asked, for example. U16 have been asked too, so that really depends. And DC, you don't ask DC to work for them. They come to you and they ask you.
Is it like a pitch, or you have to send them something like?
Yeah. You have to send a pitch and then a note of intention. What do you want to do? And then a synopsis normally. For Millennium, I had to talk I think we have a meeting of almost 4 hours with the agent of the Stieg Larsson family for me to explain what I wanted to do. So yeah, you have to prove that you can do something that I think is relevant.
But you still have to prove it, or it's
today?
Yeah.
No, I mean I don't have to prove it that I can write a script, but every time you send a new project, you never know if it will be accepted somewhere. A challenge and a bet. I mean, you never know.
Yeah, but it goes really well for you, I've heard. The hit rate is really high.
No, yeah. I mean, so far, I think I have sold like more than 3 million books right now in total. But it's still challenging, and that depends how the industry is going. I mean, right now, industry is quite tough, like for a lot of different industries. It's not only books, it's video games, movie, TV series. So it's harder to get signed because they can only publish a certain amount of book every year, of TV series or video games, so there is a lot of competition. It's not like authors are not acting against each other, but it's just that my publisher told me like normally receive 5-6 projects a day, and he can sign 15 projects a year. So that's the kind of competitive industry.
Tough.
We are in. Yeah, it's about creativity, heart, and passion, but it's also a tough industry, yeah.
What do you like the most, like video games or like comics? Or
it's really different. What I really like with comics is that you have a lot of freedom, and you cannot really find that anywhere else. You have the freedom to propose like a lot of different kind of projects, because normally in some other industry, if you start to write science fiction or crime, you're kind of forced to stick in that genre. It's really hard to go in another like genre. And I mean, it's not a definitive rules, but it's more like that. In graphic novel, they are more open-minded about that. So I can write science fiction, crime, fantasy, horror, a lot of different things. And that's what I like, because myself as a reader or viewer, I really like a lot of different things. So that's what I really like. Video games, it's really fun. It's really different too, because a video game, of course, it's about the gameplay. So people are playing a game not because of a story. They want to have fun playing. Of course, you have like narrative game with a story is really important, but a good game cannot be only a good story. I mean, a good story and a bad gameplay make a bad game. So as a narrative designer, a narrative director, you arrive behind.
Okay.
In the other industry, you are the first one doing something with the script. When you are working in the video game, you have to follow like the gameplay, to adapt what you write to the gameplay, and everything has to be focused on the quality of the gameplay. So you arrive behind, and I think it's really interesting, because then
it's like a new way in a way, because you don't write the story.
Yeah, I mean, you can write a story, but it has to be anyway at the service of the gameplay. So you can have a really good idea story-wise, but then if it doesn't fit the gameplay, you have to put it away. And the TV series is really interesting, but the thing is like it's really competitive too, but it's kind of tough industry, I would say, because there is a lot of money. And it will be the same with graphic novel. If a graphic novel would cost 30 million €, to produce, you would have the same problem or the same kind of difficulty that you can have in the TV industry, of course. So there is a lot of money involved. So you don't have the same kind of freedom that you have in the book industry, in the TV industry. That's for sure.
Have you ever thought about just being an author and just writing books?
Yeah, but then I would come back to what I wanted first to become a journalist. I think if I would go to write books, it would be books about like politics or subject, about sociology or economy or things like that, actually. Not specifically a fiction. But right now I just don't have the time to do that. Yeah. I'm already running out of time for all the project that I'm doing. So, yeah. So it's, those industries are really, really different on those aspects, like between books and the graphic novel, the comics, the TV series, and the video game. What is good in Sweden is that the video game industry is really strong here, so you have a lot of possibility. And I think in general there is a nice atmosphere in the video game industry still, even if there is a lot of money. Still a lot of nice people. I mean, you have nice people in TV and movie too, but it's more rough. I mean, it's not a myth that you can find really, really bad people in the movie TV industry.
Is it bigger in France, the TVs?
Yeah, it's a bigger country. There is more money.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean it's better, but yeah, it's
bigger.
It's bigger because there is more money, because there is more people. There's a lot of difference also between, I think, Sweden and France, is that in France, like the government help a lot the culture industry in general. That's not the case in Sweden. So that make it a bit more difficult in Sweden, actually.
How it's better in France?
There is more funding. There is more like helps, like financially. So the system is really different. So it's more easy because they understand that we have specificity, like in the culture industry, that you don't have in other industry. For example, when I write a new script, I'm not paid, and it can take months to write a new script, and I'm not paid by anyone. In general, if you work whatever, I mean, if you work on TV or if you work like in a bakery or in a supermarket as a doctor, if you work, you get paid.
Yeah, of course.
Here it's real work, but it's not paid. So there is some help or incentive in the culture industry to kind of rebalance that. It's not that they want to be nice with us, especially in France, but they understand that if you don't help people that way, they cannot make it. And I think in Sweden, they should think through that, because I know that video game industry, I mean, there's a lot of money, so even if there is problem now, it's okay. But I know people from the book industry and comics industry or even TV, and they are really struggling, actually. And because a lot of people don't realize that, but for example, in France, the revenue of the culture industry in France is 5 times the revenue of the car industry.
Oh.
So just saying, if there is some Swedish politician listening here, it's not only about it's really important to help culture, but if you want really to focus on the economical side, there is also something here, a strong culture industry brings money and revenue in the country and more tax, and they can have this kind of virtuous circle.
But it's very noticeable that in France that it's really important with like culture, like you say, and people react to it. Like the political power is so big. I'm thinking of the terror attack in Charlie Hebdo.
Yeah. Yeah, of course. I mean, that was a terrible event. I remember that actually I was on the French radio when the attack happened. So we were on this kind of podcast for French international television. And then when we went out, we just hear the news that the attack had just happened. And of course, there is people that we have been followed all of during our life, really famous, illustrator. And then we just realized that they have been killed. So it was really a shock. It was like a comics political, it is still existing newspaper, Charlie Hebdo. So yeah, there is this kind of comics and illustration and graphic novel are important in France. On a more positive aspect, there is one graphic novel about like environment, how to like create a sustainable like future for humanity, published by Dargo, my publisher, and it has been like published 3 years ago, and now there are over 1 million copies sold. So it's one of the most sold, one of the political book who has been the most sold like in France the last 3 years, and it's a graphic novel. So that's, I mean, you can talk about everything in a graphic novel format, and it's I think it's really. I would like advise like Swedish people who want to have a look to go in a graphic novel bookshop in France to see what they can find.
Very, very interesting.
Yes.
Okay, time is already running up, but for everyone that is super hooked into this episode, don't worry, we will continue with another episode in the next month and invite Sylvain again. For now, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. Looking forward the new episode too.
Yes.
It was really nice to be able to exchange with you.
Yeah. Tack också till dig kära lyssnare för att du har lyssnat på det här avsnittet, och har du några frågor till oss eller våra gäster så är det bara att mejla dem till info@metropol.se. Glöm inte heller att prenumerera så du inte missar när nya avsnitt släpps. Tills dess, ha det så bra. Hej då!
Hej då!
Hej då!